So let's move on now to the main section of the evening. Terry, as one of the icons of our generation and a long-standing patron of One-to-One Children's Fund from its inception, we're so grateful to you for all that you do for us and all that you do for many others. And we're also extremely grateful to Daniel Finkelstein, arguably Britain's foremost political commentator, for giving up his time to join us tonight as our conversation host. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you. What do you mean, arguably? Thank you so much, David. It's a real privilege to not be here, I suppose you could say, but to be on this virtual call, really innovative, and give us a chance to meet, even if we do so virtually. It's also a tremendous privilege to be helping this amazing charity, at the same time to be having a chance to be in conversation with Terry. So let me first start with this, Terry. Can you get, people will be familiar, I suppose, with your story, but there's nothing like hearing from you directly. I think you wrote about this quite recently, the story of the heroic work you were doing with hostage rescue and how it linked to you yourself becoming a hostage.
To cut a long story short, I was captured, trust was broken between myself and the people with whom I was negotiating, and I found myself in an underground cell. And again, well, it was a pretty awful place because it was deep beneath the car park in somewhere in Beirut, I've no idea where. It was rigged out as a very small prison. There was a very primitive shower and toilet facilities. The place was tiled, so there was no room to move around. I was just fastened there. Later on, I was moved to be in bombed out buildings, but the conditions were that I was always chained to the wall, not to a radiator. Many people said it's gone into mythology that it was a radiator. It wasn't a radiator. Staples were driven into the wall, and my hands and feet were fastened to these 23 hours and 50 minutes a day. I slept on the floor. There was no natural light. Metal shutters were in front of the window if I was upstairs, so no natural light came in. Occasionally there was electric light, but not often. No books or papers, no communication with the outside world. When anyone came in the room, I had to pull a blindfold over my eyes. And I slept on the floor. And so that lasted for 1,763 days that I can remember, which is almost 5 years. Initially, now just let me say one thing before I say this, that is an extreme situation, of course it is. There are many people who've suffered worse, but there are not many people who will have to endure that long period of isolation. But I've always believed that it's from extreme situations, such as I've described, that we can take understandings that are applicable to so-called life today, to life, normal life, so-called normal life. But even today, it's not normal life, it's abnormal life for the vast majority of people. And I think some of the feelings I had and the ways of coping can be translated to help people today. For example, when I was first captured, I was angry and I was frustrated. Now, I've known many hostages who've, when they've been captured, have been so frustrated and so angry that they've, for instance, banged their head constantly against the wall until their head bled. And there are some who've committed suicide. Just because they could not see a way out of this situation and they became utterly frustrated. One of the things you have to do initially is come to terms with your own feelings about this. One of the things about being in solitary, being in isolation, is that there's a tendency to become introverted, to look in, understandable. And when you do that, you discover, any human being will discover the two sides of character. You know, some call it light and dark, whatever you call it, good and evil, it doesn't matter. But there are two sides of character. And if you begin to dwell on the negative side, you can thickly fall into depression. And that's something else which sometimes people feel in captivity. So first of all, you have to make the recognition that we're all human beings. We're all made in the very same way, on similar ways. We all have this within us. And it's an opportunity to work for some degree of internal integration, if you like, to get to know yourself better. So rather than take the experience as being a totally negative experience, look at it the other way and say, this has the possibility of being a very positive experience. Now, it's extremely worrying. I don't underestimate for one moment the fact that many people will be worried about their job, they'll be worried about their future, they'll be worried about their ability to cope. But those are exactly the same worries in different form that you have to face in captivity. I was worried about my family. I was tortured. I had a mock execution. I didn't know whether I was going to live from today for the next day. I had to somehow face that and say, what I need to do is live for the moment, live for now. Now I have life, not tomorrow, but now. So therefore, try and live it as fully as possible. And I used to say to myself, this wouldn't be so bad if I was in my own room at home by myself, where I could be surrounded by my books, where I could have music, where I could communicate with people. I didn't have that. And so therefore, all my activity had to be mental activity. I had to use my imagination. I had to be creative. I wrote my first book in my head without pencil and paper, which I never had in those years. And I wrote it in my head. It was published when I came out of captivity. So somehow, taking it as a positive experience, or the possibility of being a positive experience. But don't misunderstand me again. I did not feel for a lot of the time that this was a creative time. I felt a lot of the time this was wasted. My life was being wasted. Here was I tied up, being wasted. Looking back on it, I actually realized it was probably one of the most creative points in my life, because it enabled me to recognize that I had abilities within me that I never knew I had, that I doubt whether they would have been brought out if I just continued in the normal pathway. So I could say that it was that creative period. But don't underestimate me again, it was difficult, it was not easy. And the whole process of going through that really was very taxing. But taking it positively enabled me to come through it. Well, that's not too long-winded an answer.
On the contrary, I mean, as you know, I wanted very much that you should tell your story, and you've done that brilliantly. I thank you very much indeed. I wanted to press on one thing, was when you said you had talked about how you thought of if you were in your own room surrounded by your own books, how different it would be. And of course, that is the experience most people have now. They feel a sense of being inside, but they are, fortunately, we have got our friends on Zoom, as it were, and we've got our books. And when you were alone, what was it that you craved most, and what freedom was it that you to do, even if you'd been inside, that you would have wanted? So what should people embrace in the difference between their situation and yours?
Well, more than anything else, to be free to see the sky. It sounds very simple. To be free to feel the wind on my face. Just to be able to experience that, rather than being confined in this dark, miserable place. I remember one occasion, I got one visit to the bathroom a day, and I had to be very quick. And in the bathroom, above the cistern, was a window which was always covered with a metal shutter, a wooden shutter, and it was always padlocked. And I was on the third or fourth level. And I remember on one occasion going into that bathroom, and it had been left unpadlocked. So I climbed up, and I just looked down at the street below. And there was a lady walking along with a bunch of flowers. And this was the first time I'd seen colour in 3 or 4 years. And I said to myself, how wonderful, how lovely, how marvellous. I'd taken that for granted in the past. I'd taken the fact that to feel the wind on your face is actually a lovely experience. That there were so many things that one had taken for granted. And now I could see that there were things in life other than some of the things I'd been seeking, which I really needed to appreciate. So I developed an appreciation in that particular way for small things.
Fascinating. How, obviously, your experiences was a searing one, and I think almost everybody who listens to it will be marveling at the way that you deal with it and the way that you've integrated it and the thoughts that you have. Does it pass this experience? Is it still with you every day? How do you feel about it in your daily life? So is there a moment now when the wind's on your cheek and you don't notice the difference, or do weeks go by when you don't think of this, or is it something that's always with you and is difficult to get past, really?
Well, the negatives of that experience have been dealt with long ago. It took me, probably when I came out, it took me about a year to begin to get back into normal life. But here I was very fortunate. I was elected to a fellowship in Trinity Hall, Cambridge, and I could be in the confines of a small community, and I could have intellectual stimulation, and I could be then free to put on paper that which I'd committed to memory in the past. So, but it did take me time to make the adjustments when I came out, and I was determined. It did change my life, because I said, well, I've been going along a certain pathway, and I've always had a salaried occupation. All my life had a salaried occupation. I thought, now is the time to make a change. And so I said, I'm not going to take up my paid job again. I'm going to try and earn my living by writing and lecturing, and give the time away to some of the things that I feel to be valuable in life, like one-to-one, or Hostage International, which I founded, or work with the homeless. And I thought, this is the time to do it. Get on with it, do it. Now, without this experience, I don't think I'd have had the courage to say, give up a salaried job. I wouldn't have had that courage. I'd have been too worried for my own survival. And yet, so it did change. And for many people, this experience now will be life-changing. Sometimes the life-changing will be forced on them by the fact there won't be a job to go to, and they'll have to change their lives. Others will want to change it voluntarily. But try and put it into the positive vein that naturally you're going to be apprehensive, naturally you're going to be concerned, but use the opportunity now to make that self-development that is possible. Now, again, just a word about, I was alone. I was in absolute solitary confinement for all those years, excepting for the last few weeks when I was put in to be with other people. And there I was actually very seriously ill. I had, in fact, what people have in an extreme degree now. This is extreme trouble with breathing. I had a bronchial infection. And I used to sit up against the wall day and night because I couldn't breathe properly. And there were 3 others in the room, and we were chained about so much apart, chained together. And I always remember Terry Anderson, one of the, who was an American journalist. He was with AP, Associated Press. He was chained up. He'd been in there a long time. And at night, he just leaned across. He didn't say a word. He just put his hand on mine. And that was immensely comforting. And I thought, well, you know, I'd often been to see people in hospital when they were very seriously ill, and sometimes wasn't sure what to say. And I realized then, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is the presence of another human being who's concerned. And one of the good things, one of the very good things that's happening as a result of this particular experience through which we're passing is that, in fact, it's helping us recognize that we are social animals it's bringing out, certainly where I am, some of the best in community and making us realize that community is important. And it's been a great leveler. You know, we're all in the same boat now. It doesn't matter what your station in life is. We're all in the same boat. We're all facing it together. And that's the way to do it. That's the way to take it. Face it together. Remember, we're immensely fortunate because we're supported. We're all supported. You might be isolated, but you're not alone because we're all in this together. We're all fighting this battle. And if we will stick to what the government says very sensibly, to be isolated at the moment for very good reason, in my view, very good reason, we shall come through this, the vast majority of us. But again, I go back to putting it into the creative mode rather than just seeing it in the negative mode. But never, ever underestimating the difficulties. There are real difficulties, of course there are.
So let me ask you, let me put you a question that Ron Finley, who's one of our participants, has put. He says, Terry's inspiring as an individual. I'm sure everyone agrees with that because he's so unusual in being able to face such isolation so successfully. So what are his tips to enable us to be as positive as he is?
The tips, as I say, you have to be able to recognize that the big tip, and I've already said it, living for the moment, living for now. Now is your life, not tomorrow. That's one it's your mental attitude. It's getting your mental attitude right. I mean, I could see my physical body deteriorating. You know, my skin grew white because there was no natural light, and I used to lose muscle tone because there was no exercise I could do. And somehow I had to say, what I can control to a certain degree is my inner life, my mental life. I can control that. I can help develop that. And that's where I had to put the concentration on. So in a sense, it's putting yourself in the right frame of mind, the right mindset to face this experience. That's the best, one of the best tips I can give. Of course, then, I mean, obviously, simple things when you're at home, and these things you can do, which you can't do in captivity. You can eat a good balanced diet. You can make sure that you don't get up and just walk around in a dressing gown or in your pajamas all day, you know, that you keep a sense of your own pride and your own dignity. I mean, the guards thought I was crazy. In the first week, I had my own clothes, just for 1 week, and then after they gave me pajamas and what have you. For the first week, I had my own clothes. And I used to remove my trousers at night as best I could because I was chained up. I managed to do it. And put them under the mattress on the floor to press them. And the guards thought, this fellow's a lunatic. You know, he's quite mad. But it was done to keep up my dignity. Keep your own dignity. Keep pride in yourself is another tip. And then, of course, you know, do some of the things, keep yourself active if that's how you wish to be, by doing some of the things you've always promised you wanted to do. Read the book. You can contact people. People will all be in contact with you. There are lots of opportunities. All the time, I mean, it's going back to the one basic theme I'm hammering home: live creatively.
Yes. Well, look, I've got a great question from Tracy Benjamin, actually, and I hadn't really thought about this, but I think she's got quite a good point. So here's the question. Given that your isolation was under duress, and you had no choice, right? Is it harder, now you've got the situation yourself where you've got to do this voluntarily, effectively? Sure, there are laws, but, you know, some people have gone out, and is it harder when you're not under the same duress, when you have some sort of a choice to isolate yourself?
No, for me, it's marvellous. To be quite honest with you, I'll be absolutely honest, I'm actually quite enjoying it. Now, what I'm not enjoying is the fact that I'm seeing around me people who are, you know, suffering pretty badly. Of course, one couldn't possibly enjoy that. But from the point of view of actually being here now by myself for the moment, for me, it is something of a break, because normally I'm 81 next month, so I'm getting on in years, but I still have a very heavy program. And this year was a particularly heavy program before me. It's gone with the wind, you know, it's gone completely. I now have a blank space before me. And I say, oh, that really is a bit of a relief. It's wonderful because now I can begin to concentrate on some of the things that I've been putting to one side, you know, beginning to write a new book or what have you. That's just utilizing what abilities I may have, what limited abilities I may have. So no, I do find it, from my point of view, quite a blessing. And of course, this form of solitude, to be perfectly honest, is, one might say, a piece of cake to what, you know, what Will was experiencing.
I think one of the reasons why we were all looking forward to this is it does help put everything into perspective, and you've done that brilliantly. If it's all right with you, I don't think we've quite finished, and maybe we could just go a little bit beyond our time, be a bit cheeky, and do that just a few more extra minutes while we've got you here. Lawrence Gould's got a good question saying, you know, you must have got depressed, and I suppose people listen to it will be in their own way have got like that. How did you break out of those moods when they took hold of you, which of course they must have done?
Well, I did get depressed, yeah. The only time I got really, really depressed was the time when the physical illness was beginning to really get to me. And I mean, this is when I was with the other hostages, and I was told by the others that at several occasions I'd fallen unconscious. I didn't even know that. I'd just gone unconscious in there. And at that time, I remember saying to myself, oh well, death will be almost preferable to what's almost becoming a living death. And then something within me said, no, don't give up. Fight on, keep going, keep going. And I suppose that's that somehow being able to summon that spirit and to overcome that feeling of that negative feeling. It just required an act of will. And then some people say, well, you've worked for the Archbishop of Canterbury, you've worked for the church most of your life. What part did faith play in all this? Well, I've never been, if I may say so, I've never been an over-religious person, in inverted commas. I have a very simple belief, really. And I could say in the face of my captors, you have the power to break my body, and you've tried. You have the power to bend my mind, and you've tried. But my soul is not yours to possess. Now, what I meant, how do you define soul? I can't define it. But for that instance, I defined it as a total person that I am. And I used to say, well, even if you kill me, you will never possess me completely. Never. And somehow, that very, very simple belief was enough to enable me to maintain hope. And I think if in all these situations, we can keep hope alive and give each other hope, then we're partly through the battle.
So, Isha's got a very good question, which is this. I'm thought all of us thinking that one of the things that's difficult to cope with this situation is not really knowing how long it'll go on for. And of course, you had that in spades. So one of the questions is, how did you cope with that, with not knowing, I suppose, if, but also, you know, in particular, when it would end, how long it would go on for?
Well, that is you know, there's a direct parallel there. None of us know at the moment. We've got some rough idea how it might go, but we don't really know. And I didn't know at all whether it would be, I mean, what you hope for, and I can remember this, you're captured and you think, oh, well, it'll be over in a couple of weeks. And then the couple of weeks go, you know, to a month, and the month goes to 6 months, and the 6 months goes to a year, and then the year goes to 2 years, and you begin to say, oh, it's gone on for a long, long time. So you don't know. And the only way to deal with that is I refer back to what I've already said. Now, live for now. We live with the illusion, really, when all this is over, we've got the illusion that tomorrow is secure and we're going to go on and on and on. It's an illusion. We don't know. We don't know what tomorrow brings under normal circumstances. So we've got some idea, but it's a little more secure than it is now, but we really don't know. So the great secret is, when you're in communication with people, when you're doing what you're doing, live it for now. That doesn't mean to say you don't plan for tomorrow as best you can. Of course you do. We all have to do that. But that's the answer, or part of the answer anyway, is living for the moment.
Lorraine de Costa has a question, I suppose, that relates to that, which is how you dealt with the fear of what might come, because that must have been quite acute at some time.
Oh, yeah, fear. I can tell you, it's awful. I remember, again, another story. I was chained up to the wall, and I was beaten on the soles of the feet with cable and that sort of thing, you know. But I remember on occasion, when anyone came in the room, I had to be blindfolded, I never saw anybody. But someone came in with an electric drill, and I thought, oh my God, you know, they're not going to use that on me. Unfortunately, they were just drilling holes in the wall to sort of put more chains in and keep me chained up for some reason or other. But that was real fear. And there was fear. And there was fear because I understood that other people, other hostages had been killed either through deliberate acts or through negligence, through not treating them properly. And I thought that was also, yes, I had to say I was afraid. And how did I cope with it? I'm not quite sure. I just recognized that I was afraid, that I was vulnerable, but I said to myself, I'm not going to be beaten by it. I'm going to stick on. I'm going to hold on. But I think fear is just a normal human emotion. We all have it to various degrees. And somehow one just has to live with it and cope with it. We're in a fortunate situation at the moment because we can share our fears. We can share our vulnerabilities with others. We can have this sort of conversation. We can have possibly some conversation with others. But I just wanted to say a word just to add to that. I was in isolation, and there were one or two people who are living alone. But there were one or two people some people who are living together, as we heard earlier about South Africa, where people are crammed together, so many in a small space of time. And that is difficult. That is difficult when you're rubbing up against somebody and you can, really find somebody perfectly congenial company. But if you're going to spend 24 hours a day in their company, that can wear pretty thin. One of the ways to deal with that, I'm sure, if you can, it's not always possible, is to somehow get away to your own space. If you're in a normal house, ordinary house, normally it's possible to get away for your own space for a while. Don't think you always have to be in the company of somebody. Get away from people from time, if you can. That isn't possible for a lot of people, but it is possible for some. And if you can do that, it'll be much easier to live together in that confined space where you're on top of each other, so to speak.
Professor Scher, first of all, one of our participants, I'm sorry I misread your name from the questions. I want to finish with a pair of questions that go together. I want to know what it was that you sort of did first, beyond seeing your own family, obviously, once you were released from captivity, and what you fancy doing first when this period of isolation is over.
Well, once I'd seen the family, believe it or not, they said, what would you like to do? Where would you like to go? And I said, I'd like to go to a bookshop. And so they took me to a little independent bookshop somewhere in Wiltshire. And I went into this bookshop and I looked around and I saw all the books on there for sale. And I thought to myself, gosh, how fortunate we are to have such a choice. When I used to read anything, I read a medicine packet that was given me, and spent hours looking at it. And I thought, and it brought me back to that very simple point which I made earlier. There are lots of things that surround us which we take for granted. Be appreciative of life. Be appreciative of the things. There's a very trite saying, which you know as well as I, the best things in life are free. Well, there is some truth in that. And yesterday, I went outside. It was a nice day up here in Suffolk, where I am at the moment. And I just sat, and the village in which we are is like a village now that must have been 60 years ago, because there's not a car moving through the place, just one or two people crossing the green. And you can see the birds in the trees, you can hear the birds and the wind, as I said, on my face. And I thought, yes, perhaps there's just a chance that when we come through this experience, all of us will be in more touch with our environment. We recognize that we belong to the earth. We recognize that we must enter into a harmonious relationship with the earth and with our environment and with each other. There's just a chance that that may happen. And we recognize that some of the social divisions, some of the religious divisions, some of the class divisions, whatever they may be, are for nothing. They don't mean anything. What really matters is that we know we belong together and we belong to our environment, and we'll make it a creative experience.
Well, I can't better that as a way to finish. I think this Zoom call, I hope the rest of the participants agree, has united such an inspirational figure with so extraordinary and inspirational charity. I hope everyone has found it the privilege that I found it to participate in this call. I hope you've had your questions answered and felt we've been in the presence of something really special.